Today we'd like to talk about incident response. And I've subtitled this a culinary expose. Often when I'm buried in this kind of work, the first thing to be sacrificed is a regular meal schedule, although maybe hard to understand that just taking a look at me. I certainly eat plenty. And caffeine, an important aspect of incident response, at least for me. So this will be an exploration of disciplines, knowledge, and skills required within a Monday in IA, so a typical day, or not typical depending on your organization. I'd like to talk a little bit about what skills and knowledge are needed, what kinds of patterns we should be looking for, and what might be of interest. They're not always obvious. And who are our friends? When you're in the middle of an incident, trying to look up the contact information for people who might be helpful isn't something you want to be doing. You want to have that ready. You want to have relationships with forensic examiners, with law enforcement, with all of those people that might actually become a part of your response. To establish those relationships on the fly while somebody's hacking you is an interesting tightrope act that you don't want to be trying to do. And what do we know about our enemies? We'll talk throughout this course about situational intelligence, operational intelligence, and just generally having a good operational view of who it is that might be coming after you and why they would be doing that. You might think the whys aren't important, it's more about who and where, but why can help you predict. If you know why, often you know when. So let's start with the easy scenario, an incident-free day. In my career for the last 20 years, I don't think I've had one of these, but this is a mythical incident-free day. Come to work. I usually get to work early, read 23, 40 articles on various IA topics before everybody else gets to work and starts bugging you. We check various information sources. This is critical. This is a part of your planning cycle. We look at US CERT, the NVD, vendor logs. We're looking for new vulnerabilities related to things that you have under your control. Constant vigilance in terms of all of the software packages, all of the systems that you are in charge of or that you in some way influence security-wise is the only way you can even try to stay ahead of the game. If a vulnerability occurs and nobody is around to hear it, I'm sorry, but the hackers have still heard about it and they're going to come in and they're going to take advantage of that vulnerability. You need to be ahead of the cycle. Check dashboard stats. This is a typical operational thing available to most organizations where you have tools that are gathering information from your network, gathering information from your firewalls, your intrusion detection systems and various other systems to let you know what's up. So you take a look at the dashboard stats. Hopefully the dashboard doesn't tell you anything interesting and you're able to go on to your next step of the day. Check on 2 or 3 of your long-term long-term IA projects. Provide guidance to 5 or 6 non-IA projects. You'd be surprised when you become known as an expert in this field what people come to ask you about. Respond to 30 or 40 critical email requests. 30 or 40 is a little low for me these days. Usually it's 50 or 60 critical requests. At least waiting for me in my email box in the morning. So the incident-free days are the easy ones to plan for. Nothing happened. Nothing's going to happen. It's a sunny day and we're going to leave for home early. Depending on the size of the organization, those can be extraordinarily rare. It's the other days that actually invoke your planning, that actually test what you have prepared to deal with. Portions of your incident response plan should be actually happening every day. Remember I mentioned the reading you should be doing, the ability to understand and know what threats are out there, The operational intelligence pieces, those are daily tasks, and they're part of your response. They're just a pre-response. And incidents are probably defined a little more broadly than your colleagues might think. You will be in the know, but your colleagues are pretty narrowly focused on what an incident really is. Let's talk about that. What really is an incident? Let's go through some scenarios. Your intrusion detection system detects an intrusion. Intrusion detection systems are one of the most poorly named devices, I think, in the world right now, in that they don't typically detect intrusions. In fact, I've never seen that happen. What intrusion detection systems typically detect are attacks. So it triggers an attack occurred. Most of them aren't smart enough yet to know that the attack resulted in an actual intrusion. So it triggers, but we don't know until we investigate really what's going on. Yes, it is an event, and it has to be dealt with as for part of your event response. The virus scanner detects something bad. Well, yeah, that's an incident. I don't care what it's detected, I don't care if it's wrong. It's still an incident, it still has to be investigated. False positives, which happen, have to be treated as true until you can prove that it's not. I've seen a 2-day investigation involving tens of thousands of dollars and large staff involved in dealing with a false positive. And in the end, our conclusion in postmortem was that we did exactly what we should have, we accomplished exactly what we should have, and it was money well spent. The firewall sees a port scan. If your firewall's not seeing port scans, you're not attached to the internet currently. This is how we detect whether or not the internet is working. Well, so I'm a little ambivalent as to whether or not this is an incident. No, most of the time, it's just a scan. Maybe, yes, kind of. This depends a little bit on your operational intelligence. You see a port scan, and if it's just from a random site, it's not really an incident, it's a port scan. If you see a port scan, and this is a level of intelligence that I actually do, and the port scan is originating from an IP address that's associated with defacement of Wikipedia pages related to your organization, now it's an incident. Getting there is quite an exercise in big data, but that's the job. The web server is slow today, incident or not. The web server is slow. They get slow sometimes. As a matter of fact, yes, it is an incident until we prove that it's not. If it's just happening randomly and it's not something that always happens to your web server at 2 a.m., we need to take a look at it. We read on US Cert, one of your software packages, something you actually use has a CVSS score of a 9.4. Well, nobody's hacking you. We don't have any evidence that you've been attacked. All we know is that suddenly one of the most widely published sources of knowledge for vulnerabilities has said that something you own is vulnerable to attack, and extremely vulnerable based on a 9.4 score. This is an incident. You aren't the only person who read this today. People who might be interested in doing you harm also read it, and they're launching the dogs. So it may not be an emergency, but depending on what kind of secondary controls you might have in place, this is something you have to deal with. It goes on your list as a priority. System log file filled up a disk, incident or not. Well, if you take availability into account, yes, certainly. It can be caused by bad software or bad practice or bad persons. It doesn't really matter which of those is causing it. We need to take a look. So let's go through the standard formula, the thing that most people use as an outline for incident response. First, prepare in advance. This is probably the most critical aspect of your incident response plan. If you're not prepared, you have no idea what to do when people start yelling and screaming and deciding whether or not they're going to fire you. Preparation is the only way you actually get to respond properly unless you're extremely experienced in this area. Policy should already be in place. It provides you with the authority to act. This is a really important concept. If you don't have policy in place that says, given certain circumstances, you can shut off the internet, pretty drastic, but may be necessary, or turn off one of your servers, turn off a server that actually is generating revenue. If that policy doesn't exist, authorizing you to do so, I suggest you don't do so, even if it's in the best interest of the company. Those kind of judgment calls shouldn't be on your plate. It should be well defined in advance what circumstances can allow which actions. If you have that in place, you're good to go. It should describe the roles and responsibilities that happen during an event. So as things start happening, who do you call? Who's on the call list for, oh my goodness, one of our servers is doing something bad? And exactly what should they be doing during an event? And this is actually kind of an interesting piece. It should establish those triggers. Remember I talked about sort of thresholds for when we get to do certain things? One of the most common mistakes made in incident response is to not pay attention to your triggers. The idea typically is we're IT, we know what we're doing, we know how to fix things, we're almost there, we just about have it fixed, and we think we've stopped these people and gotten them off of our network. Let's not invoke our disaster recovery plan. Let's not turn that server off. Let's not do that drastic event, even though our policy says we should have by now. Resist the temptation to believe you've got it just about fixed. Usually when you think you've got it just about fixed, you're about a third of the way through actually fixing it. So well-defined triggers that trigger specific responses is actually a really important thing to concentrate on. The plan should be published. What if you're not around? What if it's up to one of your lieutenants? What if neither of you are around? It cannot be that because you're incommunicado for some reason, the company is unable to respond, unable to actually deal with an incident of this nature. The roles have to be published. Involved parties should be trained. It's well-known human behavior that if we actually learn how to do something and drill, we do it better. We're better at doing things we've done before. If you've never, ever invoked the plan before and nobody involved with the plan has tried out their role, it will be a disaster. You should have multiple access methods available for the plan. One of my favorite sorts of events is an event that takes down the LAN or the internal network for a corporation for any reason, and you realize that the plan is published on a server that's no longer available to you. It should be printed, it should be in multiple locations. Most likely one or two of you should have it at home. There's a lot of different mechanisms for making that available, and it's a rookie mistake to just have it available in one system that may actually become unavailable because of the incident itself.